Well, there was a lot to like in last night's game. Unfortunately, it's another loss for your Seattle Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken. And yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about last night's game. There's some things that I really liked. There's some things that I absolutely didn't like. And we'll talk a little bit about all of those, including some stock up, stock downs. Want to know your thoughts on some of the players that we have with the Kraken, some young blood. Of course, we talked about Riker Cartier. Whoa. We talked about Riker Evans coming into this game. But I think, especially after last night, we have to talk about Ty Cartier again. So we'll do all of that. But ultimately, your Seattle Kraken falls short to the Calgary Flames, a 4-3 score in overtime. The Calgary Flames scored the first goal, the lone goal in the first frame. The Seattle Kraken, though, responded two of their own in the second frame. And, Calgary got two back in the third. The Seattle Kraken, though, did equalize the game, tie it up there, and get it into overtime. Overtime, you probably know where I'm going if you're an everydayer or an OGer. Matty Beniers, you got to look at Matty on that play, because once it became clear Vince was going to shoot that puck, then that meant Beniers is the only logical choice to get back into position. I thought he stuttered just a little bit. That being said, it's also a pretty hard shot coming in from Vince Dunn. What do you do? Tell Vince not to take that shot? I think you have to just have a little more awareness if you're Matty Beniers in that situation. And was it Eberle that was down with them? I think it was Eberle or whomever was that lead forward. They were below the goal line by the time, Vince Dunn shoots that. So again, the only logical choice is Matty Beniers to kind of get back to position as soon as possible, even before necessarily knowing where that puck is going to go. Because, you're not going to make yourself available for Vince in that situation. You didn't have an odd rush. It wasn't a breakaway. So if I want to be nitpicky, that's probably one of the things. I think it was one of the goals, right? The one right off the face-off. Maybe not so great. But overall, the fight of this team, and, we've talked about that before. I think there is fight with this team, and some of these notes I have to give credit to Zame for, because we were planning a co-hosted show today. We had to switch some things around, but I thought it was interesting. One of the comments that I completely agree with what Zame had for this show is, it's another late night, it's another late comeback, right? Having to get a lot done in the third frame. The team doesn't quit, and you never feel like they're out of the game. That was a note that Zame left up for today's show. And yeah, I agree with that to an extent. I think that there is a lot of fight. We've had to see this team come from behind, and they've been able to win games in similar situations. You see who they've gone into overtime with, who they've won or lost overtime or tight, close games to. And I think you take that overall. Where I had put in our comments in our show notes that I mildly disagreed is that, for me, knowing that the team can pull out a win, I love that. And there's a decent amount of games where this team didn't really have the juice. They didn't have the jam. And it's like, does this team always have to be coming from behind to be able to win? Does the team, how can the team maybe manufacture that energy, right? That determination that we sometimes see late in games, and spread that out between a whole game, but more specifically a whole season. Like there were just games this season where I would have loved to see the Kraken put forth the effort that they sometimes put forth at the end of games. And sometimes those games are the same, right? They won't start well and then they have this epic comeback. I don't know that that was really the case against Calgary. I think the Kraken, again, we'll talk about some individual players, but I like what they did overall. But there are a decent amount of games where it was more of, is it a mistake by Beniers? You could really nitpick and say, sure. I, of course, am always looking at defense. And I just think one of those things is something that you have to be thoughtful of and anticipate when you are in overtime. Yeah, you could have your literal last line of defense, your last defender shoot a puck 3-on-3. Who's responsible for getting back in the event that you lose possession? The rebound comes out. These are things that usually you're able to discuss. So it's harsh, but it's a true reality. He's got to be more aware in that situation. Unless you don't want Dunn taking that shot, which I wouldn't say that as a coach, but I think there is a world that exists where you're like, hey, be mindful of a shot. If you don't think you have it clean, we have to be thoughtful of rebounds. If a rebound pops out and it becomes effectively a breakaway pass, is that what we want? That's all strategy. Anyway, I want the Seattle Kraken to be able to have more of the comeback fight spirit than the, maybe overtime, overcommitting, overcorrecting kind of thing. And even those losses are not as bad as they couldn't get anything together. They couldn't get shots on goal. The communication wasn't there. The defense was lacking at every point in turn. I mean, those games are super frustrating. So it's not great. It doesn't feel great. I'm sure it didn't feel great for the team to lose that game. And if you're gonna lose, then I'd rather, you go down knowing that you did what you could, and that you own any mistakes. That's what I want from the Kraken. But this again was some of the points that Zame had for today's episode that I think are really important to bring out, including that Hayden filling in at center is pretty solid. I've talked about on the last handful of shows, the Kraken are down some centers, whether it's because of Stevenson and Stevie and his injury or getting rid of Yanni Gourde. Interesting article about Tampa Bay and how at the trade deadline things are starting to click by bringing over folks with chemistry, aka Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand. So that was a painful article to read, but yeah, good for them. Good for Yanni, good for Ollie. Anyway, also Zame had noted that the Eyssimont, Cartier, and Hayden line overall, best line all night, 66 expected goal share. I also noted that, Ty Cartier did have that really sick shot. I think it was bar down. It was just an absolute snipe. And who was it who scored on the power play? That was Jaden. Jaden's goal I really liked because the passing was beautiful. That's another thing I really liked about this. What I liked about this game, that was McCann and Burakovsky setting Jaden Schwartz up for that. Now, we did see Eberle score later, in the game. He got his 9th goal of the game, and he was assisted by Schwartz and Beniers. So I made a note that I love that Jaden is getting activated with Berkey. It also, I just love Schwartz with Beniers and Kakko. So, it's taking some getting used to, but it seems like Schwartz, McCann, and Berkey, that could be a nice combo. And I've said it before, the combos are going to change and they probably should change. You know how I feel about intentionally losing, but also part of what needs to happen here, whether you win the game or lose the game, at least you try to win the game. but you have to try to learn how to win with different combinations. I think it's as much for the coaching staff to figure out, okay, what is actually going to work, but also getting the guys some reps in different positions to make them a little more versatile to figure out what lines really work. So, as much as I know that we need some experimentation, I just really like certain combos together. But I've also said that McCann seems like he's a little lost in the sauce. And so if this is what it takes, I'll take it. Um, but overall, the Seattle Kraken, you take this loss for what it is. You're able to get a point. Talked about playing spoiler for Calgary and other teams, as they try to work their way up closer to a wild card spot, like is the case, as is the case with Calgary. Only thing I want to point out here that Zame actually pointed out, which I don't like for sure, but that's that Beniers line struggled a little bit. So thinking of Beniers, Kakko, and Newman, they actually of all forwards had the lowest game score per hockey stat cards, excuse me. And at the top, Jaden Schwartz, Vince Dunn, Ty Cartier had great numbers in game score, with Jaden leading the pack there. And that doesn't surprise me at all. But, what I think is interesting is, although I have felt that this season McCann's got a little bit lost in the sauce, would you be surprised to know that he's one of a few candidates to have 20 goals this season? We're going to talk about that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed has sponsored jobs to put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. You know how important it is when you're running a business or operating your own personal business. You know how important it is to find the right candidates as quickly as possible, because the whole point of you hiring is to be able to maximize what your business can do. And so being able to get those job posts seen as quickly as possible, that's huge. And now you can spend and now with Indeed, you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/locked on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That would be Locked On Kraken. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, then you need Indeed. Hey, thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken. I'm rocking my 206 PWHL Takeover Tour hoodie. I freaking love this thing. It's so sick. I made sure that I got one from the PWHL Takeover Tour, and it matches the Locked On Kraken vibe. So if you didn't know, I am the co-host of the Locked On NHL Women's Hockey Report. Comes out every Saturday, and we're expecting to have a special guest once again on the show from the Minnesota Frost. So I'll just leave that there. Also might be an international player. Mm-hmm. So we're hoping we can lock that in for you. No pun intended. Anyway, moving on to the Seattle Kraken. Scoring leader. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, previewing the Seattle Kraken game. We have to think of some other players as well. So, Jaden Schwartz on that power play goal actually reached the 21 goal mark for the second time with the Seattle organization, 6th overall in his career. And so he joins, of course, Eli Tolvanen. And there are 4 players that have a shot of getting to the 20-plus goal mark. And I want to talk about who those guys are. So you've got, this is 21 plus 20 or more goals this season. So not looking at the points. So for goals overall, you've got Jared McCann, Matty Beniers, and Shane Wright all with 17 goals. Brandon Montour has 16, and that's already the record for defensemen. That's already the record for defensemen for this franchise. The franchise record for 20 goal scorers is 6, and that was set by the 22-23 playoff team. So we already have 2, 4 more that would give us exactly the 6 record from the playoff season. So what does that say? I wonder that team had 6 20 goal scorers, and we could see that happen again this season. But this is not a playoff team. With McCann, we've seen Jared McCann reach 100 goals and 100 assists. He's the first Seattle Kraken player to do that. And he got both of those marks this season. And this is what I keep telling you. And Bob Condor writes, quote, "The veteran forward has filled many roles beyond goal scorer this season, including as a primary penalty killer and occasional center, a position requiring more defensive duties plus setting up teammates for scoring chances. If McCann again reaches 20 goals, he'll be the first Kraken to do so in each of the first 4 seasons." And so, I mean, I would love to see Jared McCann make that mark, right? And I told you that, he was set up. And I told you, he set up Jaden Schwartz for his 21st goal. It was the 32nd assist or point for McCann. McCann picked up his 32nd assist by setting up Schwartz. But if you look at that replay, and I think it was mentioned on the broadcast, McCann could have taken that shot. And it was a high chance that would have been a goal for McCann also. And so Bob Condor, in what I just read you, he's talking about how McCann is taking on a lot of different roles. I would love to see McCann in the next 11 games be able to be a little bit more of a goal scorer himself. Again, he's at 17 goals. 3 more in 11 games would be great. And I think that it goes back to something that we talked about, I guess maybe almost 2 weeks ago now, where McCann, Larson, we've talked about it with Beniers, with Shane Wright. There have been players that we know Dan Bylsma is asking to shoot a little bit more, to shoot and then think, as opposed to overthink and then maybe not shoot at all. And McCann is one of them. And so I don't know if he's aware or will be made aware that he's almost at 20 goals. I don't know if that would necessarily motivate him or not, given that I get the sense that McCann would say, hey, I'll score whatever you need me to, if that means we're en route to the playoffs. That's the kind of vibe I feel like he might give if he's asked. That being said, I think what Bob wrote, what I've been saying, is very true. The role that he's had has not set him up to be a 20 goal scorer. And has that been a folly, right, of this team and this coaching staff? I would argue that, yeah, probably, potentially. I think also, though, we've heard from Bylsma, I've talked about it as well. If you move McCann somewhere else or someone else to be with McCann, then what does that do to the other portion of the line that they're coming from? Who gets moved and is going to also at least keep the standard, if not benefit the other line, as opposed to the sacrifice being one way or the other. So, again, I've talked about it a bunch. I guess we don't really know what the right answer could be or should have been, but I would love to see McCann be a little more selfish, which means that he probably could get to 20 or more goals this season. And I think a McCann that's scoring at least at least 20 goals for us, that's a good position to be in if you're the Seattle Kraken. So, who will join Eberle? Who will join Jaden Schwartz? I want to see Jared McCann do it. But I would love if we got all four. So I talked a lot about McCann. I told you we had our conversation with Jessica Campbell. She was on the show, exclusive interview, and she told us this is the year of Beniers. So of course I want to see Matty B be able to get there as well. It's Matty, Shane, McCann, and Montour who are within 4 goals of 20. So let's do it. Let's get 6 guys to be 20 or more goal scorers. I would love to see it. I don't know how likely it is, but I'd still love to see it. And if I had to pick, oh, it's tough. I'm going McCann. Then I think honestly, Wright, Montour, and Beniers. Wright, Beniers, Montour, or Beniers, Wright, Montour. Some combination of that. I'm trying to decide if it's more important, I think, to have Shane Wright have a quote unquote successful season in that way as opposed to Matty Beniers. I honestly think it's probably a coin toss there. On the one hand, Shane showing positive trajectory. On the other hand, Matty Beniers being able to bounce back from maybe what was a sophomore slump. So, ooh, and then I mean, why not have Brandon? You know what? Let's just have them all do it. I don't know. I choose not to choose. Coming up, though, maybe this goes into what I'm kind of saying here, though. Let's talk stock up, stock down on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at Trade Coffee. And if you're like my mom, your mornings have to start with a good cup of coffee. And she, my mother, is such a coffee enthusiast that even though I do not drink coffee myself, I know all of the questions to ask. I know about a French press or pour over or instant or medium roast versus dark roast and all of these things. And so when I was looking to find a way to just reconfirm that I am the favorite daughter, I leaned on Trade Coffee. I was able to ask my mom specific questions, but really just knowing her preferences so well, I was able to curate a few options that I thought my mom would really like. That's because Trade is the number one specialty coffee marketplace, bringing fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. And I was able to match a roast with what I know are things that my mom liked. And I could even get her a subscription. You know, Mother's Day is coming up because I'm a May baby, so I know these things. And so maybe getting her a subscription so that she gets to taste all these wonderful coffees throughout the country. Yeah, I think that would definitely steal the deal, at least for another few years, right, of best daughter. So if you want to be the best daughter or best sibling, or if you are like my mom and really enjoy coffee, Trade Coffee is exclusively offering our listeners, or if you're just an enthusiast, a coffee enthusiast, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your order at drinktrade.com/locked on NHL. That's drinktrade, TRADE.com/locked on NHL for 40%. That's a nice percentage. 40% off your first order, drinktrade.com/locked on NHL. And thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala coming to you from Black Rosie Media headquarters. If you are listening on audio or if you're on YouTube, hey YouTubers, thanks for all the comments this week. I want to point something out. So Locked On Kraken, hold on, there we go. Locked On Kraken now has a YouTube, or excuse me, Locked On Kraken now has a TikTok account. If you do follow on TikTok, Black Rosie Media, which is also me, you've seen that I post some of my Locked On Kraken shorts on TikTok. Now we have a TikTok account, and I definitely use TikTok more than any of the other platforms, even Blue Sky. But Blue Sky's getting there. Anyway, the point is, you should definitely follow Locked On Kraken on TikTok for all of your Seattle Kraken content. Okay, stock up, stock down. Ooh. So Zame and I had a few names. I'm not going to go over all of them, especially because some of the names I feel like I alluded to earlier in the episode. But if we look at stock up, stock down, I'm going to start with Mikey Eyssimont. And speaking of TikTok, I have a really fun video that I put up there, especially if you love dance hall music. But anyway, I digress. Stock up, stock down on Mikey Eyssimont. I think I'm stock up. And here's the thing. The reason I say stock up on Mikey Eyssimont is because I really don't know what I expected. I was so focused on some of the other elements of that trade with Tampa Bay. I even alluded to Oliver Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde. I almost said Newman in my head even. I almost I was focused on that part that I didn't know too much about Eyssimont coming in. But for this season, he has 7 goals, 6 assists, for 13 points overall. When you look at what he was able to do for the Kraken, of his 7 goals, he's got 2 of those in 10 games and 1 of his 5 assists in the 10 games that he's played for the Seattle Kraken. He's a +1, and Eyssimont is a sandpaper guy. He's a drive hard to the net, give you some moxie kind of guy, and yeah, stock up for me. So another player that we had on here is Kakko. I mentioned it in the breakdown, or the preview, I should say, of this game against Calgary, that Kakko is on pace to be able to reach the stats that he had while he was competing for the Rangers. So he already has 25 points in 39 games for the Seattle Kraken, where he had 4 points, he had 14 points in 30 games this season for the Rangers. He was a +9 with the Rangers. He's a -11, but the ice time is also different. He's got about 17 and a half minutes of time on ice versus about 13 minutes with the Rangers. So I think that I'm stock up. I do think there's been a little bit of a plateau for Kakko. I think there's been a little bit of a plateau. He doesn't, in his last 5 games, he has two goals. I like that he had the 2 goals against Edmonton the other day, and we're going to see them later this week. So I like the 2 goals against Edmonton. That was a good game for Kakko, but before then, we were waiting for him to connect, to really be able to. Of course, we want him to score goals. I think he's a little bit more of a facilitator than I was expecting. Not a problem per se, because in theory, right, that can open up Matty Beniers and his game, which I think we have seen, which is why I think I'm probably neutral on Kakko, especially since if you had asked me like a few days ago, like a week ago, maybe I'd say something different. I'm going to go neutral right now, but definitely still trending up. Yanni Newman. Oh, man. I like the potential here. I definitely like the potential for Yanni. He's a big guy, as he told us, right? Big guy. He also was able to get going in that game against Edmonton. We saw him score that goal in Winnipeg, against Winnipeg. He's got 2 goals and 2 assists in 7 games played for the Seattle Kraken. I think he's probably stock up right now, but maybe trending to neutral. I want to make sure it's not just kind of like that hype of I'm in the NHL now hype, and again, nobody really knowing him because he's only got 7 games. I wonder how much he can keep up that pace and use that big guy body. And it's wild because, how old is this guy right now? He's he's 20 years old, 212 pounds. Yeah, he can probably beef up even more. So I'm excited. I think the upside is good right now. I'm gonna leave the other ones alone right now, and I'll probably add one more to this list. But there's 2 other names that Zame and I had, and then there's another one that I probably want to add too. But overall, I'm mostly neutral right now, but trending up. Shane Wright, Matty Beniers, and Philip Grubauer I want to throw in the mix. I want to continue to have our stock up, stock down conversation and think a little bit about those guys. But I've mentioned a few things about Shane. I know that Zane talked about Shane last week, and I think made some really valid points. So, and then Philip Grubauer. We haven't talked about Gru in a little bit here, so we'll do a stock up, stock down coming up on another episode. And then, yeah, I know if you're an insider, you know that we are planning to revive or really just kind of blend the tank conversation on the show. I have to go back to the drawing board when it comes to scheduling things. But if you haven't already, make sure you send what your thoughts are on team tank or team no tank, team compete. There we go. Team compete. Are you team compete or team tank? We hope to go over that again. One, because it's a debate that will be ongoing for at least 11 more games for the Seattle Kraken. But also, I mean, it's kind of one of those fun debates that you can always go back and forth on. And so, yeah, we hope to bring some of that to you, but you know how we do. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and we hold fast, we stay true, and loud and proud we say, as Edmonton gets ready to come to CPA, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.